The text message came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. 4 simple words that would change everything. "We need to talk." From my mother. At midnight. About my wedding fund that I'd been building for 4 years. Saving every spare dollar from my graphic design freelance work. Skipping dinners out, buying generic groceries. All for the perfect spring wedding Marcus and I had been planning. The fund that contained $35,000 of my blood, sweat, and countless sacrifices. The fund that, according to the voicemail I'd just listened to 3 times, no longer existed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The kitchen light cast harsh shadows across my Pearl District apartment as I sat staring at my phone, replaying my mother's message for the 4th time. Her voice had that forced cheerfulness she used when delivering bad news. Like when she told me our family dog had been hit by a car, or when Dad's accounting firm nearly went bankrupt 3 years ago. "Luna, sweetie, we need to discuss some changes regarding your wedding arrangements. There's been a family emergency with Dylan, and, well, we'll explain everything when we see you. Come by the house tomorrow evening." My hands trembled as I set the phone down on the granite countertop. Marcus emerged from our bedroom, his dark hair tousled from sleep, concern etched across his features. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I couldn't form words immediately. The weight of what I suspected sat heavy in my chest like a stone. "My parents want to see me tomorrow." "About the wedding fund." I managed to keep my voice steady, but Marcus knew me well enough after 3 years together to read the worry in my eyes. He moved closer, his warm hand finding mine. "Did they say what about?" "Dylan's in some kind of trouble again." I laughed bitterly. "When isn't he?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd witnessed enough of my brother's financial disasters over the years to understand the implications. Dylan Rodriguez, 28 years old and perpetually broke despite his computer science degree and decent job at a local tech company. Dylan, who'd borrowed money from our parents 6 times in the past 2 years. Dylan, who'd convinced them to co-sign on a car loan he'd defaulted on. Dylan, who always seemed to land on his feet while everyone else cleaned up his messes. "They wouldn't touch your wedding money," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "That's your money, Luna. You've been saving since before we even got engaged." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But I knew my parents, Patricia and Robert Rodriguez, successful accountants who ran their own firm but somehow always found themselves financially strained whenever Dylan appeared with another crisis. They'd taught me about fiscal responsibility, about saving for important goals, about the value of hard work. They'd also taught me that family came first, always, even when family made terrible decisions. Sleep didn't come that night. I lay beside Marcus, listening to his steady breathing, while my mind raced through possibilities. Maybe Dylan had gambling debts. Maybe he'd invested in another one of his get-rich-quick schemes. Maybe he was in legal trouble. Each scenario I imagined seemed to require exactly the amount of money sitting in my wedding account. The next morning brought no relief. I attempted to focus on work, editing promotional materials for a local brewery, but my concentration shattered every few minutes. Around noon, Marcus appeared at my home office door with a cup of coffee and his laptop bag. "I'm working from home today," he announced, settling into the chair across from my desk. His startup, a mobile app development company called Thompson Tech, allowed flexible schedules. But Marcus rarely took advantage unless something important demanded his attention. "You don't need to babysit me," I protested, though secretly I felt grateful for his presence. "I'm not babysitting. I'm providing moral support." He opened his laptop and began typing, but I caught him glancing at me every few minutes throughout the afternoon. At 5 o'clock, I couldn't delay any longer. Marcus insisted on driving me to my parents' house in Beaverton, a modest 2-story colonial in a quiet neighborhood where I'd grown up. The familiar sight of the red brick exterior and my mother's carefully maintained rose garden usually brought comfort. Today, it felt ominous. "I'll wait in the car," Marcus said as we pulled into the driveway. My father's silver Honda and Dylan's beat-up Subaru were already there. "No," I said quickly. "Come in with me. Whatever this is, I want you there." My mother answered the door before we could knock, her graying hair pulled back in its usual neat bun, wearing the blue cardigan I'd given her last Christmas. "Luna, honey. Marcus, good to see you." Her smile seemed forced, and she avoided direct eye contact. The living room felt smaller than I remembered. My father sat in his recliner, his usually confident demeanor subdued. Dylan occupied the couch, looking uncharacteristically serious. At 28, my brother still possessed the boyish features that had always helped him charm his way out of trouble. But tonight, he appeared older, worn down by whatever crisis had brought us together. "Sit down, both of you," my mother said, gesturing toward the remaining chairs. "We need to discuss some recent developments." I remained standing, my arms crossed. "Just tell me what happened to my wedding fund." The silence stretched uncomfortably. My father cleared his throat and leaned forward in his chair. "Luna, your brother found himself in a difficult situation." "What kind of situation requires $35,000? My voice came out sharper than intended. Dylan finally spoke, his eyes fixed on the coffee table. "I made some bad investments. Cryptocurrency. I thought I could triple the money quickly, maybe help the family out, but the market crashed, and I lost everything. Then I borrowed more, thinking I could win it back." He looked up at me with those puppy dog eyes that had gotten him out of trouble since childhood. "I owe some serious people, Luna, the kind who don't just send collection letters." My mother's voice wavered as she continued the explanation. "He came to us 2 weeks ago. These people were making threats, calling the house, showing up at his work. We couldn't let our son get hurt over money. So you gave him my money." The words fell flat in the quiet room. "Without asking me. Without even telling me." "We planned to tell you," my father said weakly. "We just needed to figure out how to explain everything." "There's nothing to explain, Dad. You stole from me." I felt Marcus move closer, his solid presence the only thing keeping me grounded. That money took me 4 years to save. 4 years of working 60-hour weeks, of saying no to vacations and nights out, of buying secondhand everything so I could have the wedding I dreamed of. "We'll pay you back," Dylan said quickly. "Every penny. I just need some time to get back on my feet." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised even me. "With what money, Dylan? You just admitted you lost everything and owe dangerous people. How exactly are you planning to repay $35,000? My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. My mother wrung her hands, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "We thought maybe you could postpone the wedding for a year. Have something smaller, more intimate." The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. Postpone my wedding so my irresponsible brother can gamble away my future? "That's not fair," my mother protested. "Dylan made a mistake, but he's still your brother. Family helps family." "Family doesn't steal from family," I shot back. And where was this family loyalty when I was working myself to exhaustion to save for something important to me? Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. and Mrs. Rodriguez, with respect, what you've done is theft. Luna trusted you with her savings, and you've given it away without her consent." My father's face reddened. "Now see here, young man, this is a family matter. Luna is going to be my wife in 3 months. That makes this my concern too." Marcus's tone remained steady, professional. "We've already paid deposits to vendors, sent invitations, made commitments based on having that money available." "We understand you're upset," my mother said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "But Dylan's safety has to come first. These people who are after him, they're not the type to wait for payment plans." I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. So my happiness, my future, my dreams matter less than cleaning up another one of Dylan's messes? "It's not like that," Dylan said, standing up from the couch. "Luna, I never wanted this to happen. I thought I could make the money back before you ever knew it was gone." "But you didn't, did you? You lost it all, and now you want me to sacrifice my wedding to save you from the consequences of your choices." My mother moved toward me, reaching out as if to offer comfort, but I stepped back.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"We raised you to care about family, Luna, to put family first." You also raised me to be responsible, to work hard, to save for my goals. Apparently those lessons only applied to me, not to Dylan. The room fell silent again. I could hear the old grandfather clock in the hallway ticking, marking seconds that felt like hours. Finally, Marcus spoke. "We need to go. Luna needs time to process this." I nodded, not trusting my voice. As we moved toward the door, my father called out, "Luna, wait. We love you. We're doing the best we can in an impossible situation." I turned back, seeing my parents through new eyes. They looked older suddenly, diminished by their choice and its consequences. "I love you too, Dad. But love doesn't justify theft. And it doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my future for Dylan's mistakes." We left without another word. In the car, Marcus started the engine but didn't immediately drive away. I sat in stunned silence, watching the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned about right and wrong, where my parents had just taught me that apparently I mattered less than my irresponsible brother. "I'm so sorry, Luna," Marcus said softly. "This is unbelievable." I finally turned to look at him, this man who'd stood by my side through everything, who'd worked alongside me to plan our perfect day, who'd never once made me feel like my dreams were less important than anyone else's. "What are we going to do? The wedding is in 12 weeks. We've already put down deposits that we'll lose if we cancel. The venue alone cost us $8,000. Marcus reached over and took my hand. "We'll figure it out. I have some savings, and maybe we can get a loan for the rest." I shook my head. "I won't start our marriage in debt because my family betrayed me. That's not fair to you." "It's not fair to you either. Your parents had no right to do this." As we drove back toward downtown Portland, my mind began working through the implications. The wedding dress I'd finally found after months of searching, purchased with a significant down payment. The photographer we'd booked almost a year in advance. The catering deposit for the historic mansion venue overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. The flowers, the music, the cake. Everything we'd planned and dreamed about now seemed impossible. But more than the financial devastation, I felt the deeper wound of betrayal. My parents had raised me to believe in honesty, responsibility, and the importance of keeping commitments. They'd taught me to work hard for what I wanted and to respect other people's property and choices. Yet when faced with Dylan's latest crisis, they'd abandoned every principle they'd instilled in me. Back at our apartment, I collapsed onto our couch, emotionally drained. Marcus sat beside me, pulling me close as the reality of our situation began to sink in. "Maybe we should call the police," he said quietly. "What they did is theft, regardless of family relationships." I considered it. Legally, he was probably right. But the thought of pressing charges against my own parents felt impossible, even after what they'd done. "I can't send my own mother and father to jail, Marcus. Even for this." "Then what do we do?" I didn't have an answer. The future I'd been building toward for 4 years had just crumbled in a single evening. The wedding I'd dreamed about since childhood now seemed like a fantasy. My relationship with my family was probably damaged beyond repair. And Dylan, the cause of all this destruction, would likely face no real consequences for his actions. "I need to call the vendors tomorrow," I said numbly. "See what we can cancel without losing all our deposits. Maybe we can have a courthouse wedding, something simple." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. "What if we don't cancel anything?" I looked at him questioningly. "Marcus, we can't afford the wedding without that money. Your savings alone won't cover everything." "You're right," he said, his expression thoughtful. "But there might be another way. I need to make some phone calls tomorrow." Something in his tone made me study his face more carefully. "What are you thinking?" He kissed my forehead gently. "I'm thinking your family has no idea who they're dealing with. They see you as someone they can push around, someone whose dreams don't matter. They're about to learn how wrong they are." I wanted to ask what he meant, but exhaustion was overwhelming me. The emotional upheaval of the evening had left me drained. As we prepared for bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that while my parents thought they'd solved their problem by sacrificing my wedding fund, they'd actually created a much bigger problem than they realized. Marcus was already reaching for his phone as I brushed my teeth. typing messages with the focused intensity I'd seen when he was working on important business deals. Whatever he was planning, I sensed it would change everything. My parents and Dylan had underestimated not just my resolve, but Marcus's as well. They'd seen him as a nice young man who would go along with their family decision to appease them. They were about to discover just how wrong they were about both of us. As I drifted towards sleep, I heard Marcus in the other room making a phone call. His voice was low, professional, discussing something about asset verification and documentation. I couldn't make out all the words, but his tone suggested this wasn't a casual conversation with a friend. Tomorrow would bring new revelations, new plans, and possibly new allies in a fight I'd never wanted but now found myself in the middle of. My parents thought they'd handled their Dylan problem by sacrificing my future. What they didn't realize was that they'd just declared war on the wrong couple. The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me was Marcus returning to bed, his arms wrapping around me protectively, and his whispered promise in the darkness. They have no idea what's coming. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Marcus speaking quietly on the phone in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through our bedroom windows, but the warmth couldn't penetrate the cold knot in my stomach. Yesterday's confrontation felt like a nightmare, except the empty feeling in my chest confirmed it had all been devastatingly real. "Yes, Eleanor, I understand the timeline is tight," Marcus was saying as I padded barefoot toward the kitchen. "But this is exactly the kind of situation we discussed. Family exploitation, financial abuse disguised as helping. She deserves better." I paused in the doorway, curious about who Eleanor was and why Marcus was discussing my family situation with her. He noticed me standing there and gestured for me to join him at our small breakfast table where he'd already set out coffee and toast. "I'll call you back in an hour," he said into the phone. "And Eleanor, thank you for this. It means everything." After ending the call, Marcus turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Determined, almost calculating, but with an underlying gentleness that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with him. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Like my entire family just voted me least important person in the Rodriguez household," I said, accepting the coffee he'd poured. "Who's Eleanor?" Marcus sat across from me, his hands wrapped around his own mug. "Eleanor Hayes. She's been mentoring me for the past 2 years, helping me grow Thompson Tech. But more than that, she's become like family to me." I knew Marcus's startup was doing well, but he'd always been modest about the specifics. "What kind of mentoring?" Eleanor built 3 successful companies before she turned 40. Sold them all and now invests in other entrepreneurs while running a foundation that helps people escape financial abuse situations. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Luna, your parents didn't just steal your wedding fund. They committed a form of financial abuse, and Eleanor has seen this pattern hundreds of times." The term financial abuse hadn't occurred to me, but as Marcus explained it, the label fit perfectly. Taking someone's money without consent, especially money saved for a specific purpose, particularly when that person is vulnerable due to family relationships. So what can Eleanor do? More than you might expect. Her foundation has helped recover stolen funds before, but more importantly, she understands how to document these situations properly and how to apply pressure in ways that make people realize they've made serious mistakes. I sipped my coffee, trying to process this new information. "Marcus, how successful is your company really?" He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since yesterday's disaster. "More successful than I've let on." I didn't want money to change how we approached our relationship or our wedding planning. I wanted those decisions to be ours together, based on what we could afford as a couple. "What does that mean exactly?" Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a banking app. The numbers on the screen made me blink several times to ensure I wasn't misreading them. Thompson Tech is worth about $4 million now. We have 6 major contracts with Fortune 500 companies, and Eleanor's been pushing me to consider acquisition offers. I stared at him, speechless. $4 million. My fiancé was essentially a millionaire, and I'd been stressing about losing $35,000 for our wedding. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I'm worth, and because I've seen what money does to families." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Like what it's done to yours." Your parents enabled Dylan's irresponsibility for years, and now they've stolen from you to continue that pattern. The irony struck me forcefully. While I'd been saving every penny, working extra hours, and sacrificing small pleasures to afford our dream wedding, my fiancé could have paid for the entire event with pocket change. Yet he'd respected my desire to contribute equally, even when it meant watching me stress over budgets and costs. So the wedding fund doesn't actually matter financially, I said slowly. We could have the wedding of our dreams regardless. That's not the point, Marcus said firmly. The money isn't what matters here, Luna. What matters is that your family betrayed your trust, stole from you, and expects you to just accept it, because family comes first. What matters is that they'll do this again to you or someone else if there are no consequences. His phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. She works early, Marcus explained, answering. Eleanor, I'm putting you on speaker. Luna's here. Luna, dear, came a warm but authoritative voice through the phone. Marcus has told me about your situation. I want you to know that what your parents did is both morally wrong and legally questionable. More importantly, it's part of a pattern that will continue unless it's stopped. I don't understand what you mean by pattern, I said. Marcus mentioned your brother has been in financial trouble multiple times before. Each time, your parents have rescued him, correct? Meanwhile, you've been financially responsible, saving money, working hard, making good decisions. Yet when a crisis occurs, who bears the cost? The responsible child. This is classic enabling behavior, combined with financial abuse of the family member least likely to fight back. Eleanor's analysis felt uncomfortably accurate. Dylan had always been the one who needed rescuing, while I'd been the reliable daughter who could be counted on to understand, to sacrifice, to put family harmony above my own needs. What can we do about it? I asked. Several things. First, we document everything properly. Marcus tells me you have access to records showing when your parents took the money and gave it to Dylan? I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. I have statements for the account where I was saving. I also have records of all the deposits I made over 4 years. Excellent. Second, we need to understand Dylan's actual financial situation. Marcus has some contacts who can help with that research. Third, we need to determine whether your parents actually had legal authority to access your money. Marcus leaned forward. The account was in Luna's name, but her parents were listed as emergency contacts with limited access. They weren't supposed to be able to withdraw money without her consent. Even better, Eleanor said, satisfaction evident in her voice. That's a clear violation of banking protocols. Luna, are you willing to pursue this seriously? Not just for the money, but to prevent your family from continuing this pattern. I thought about my conversation with my parents the night before. Their assumption that I would simply accept their decision, that my dreams mattered less than Dylan's problems, that being the responsible child meant always being the one who sacrificed. Yes, I said, I'm willing. Then here's what we're going to do. Marcus, can you meet me at my office this morning? Bring Luna if she's comfortable. I want her to meet David Chen, the attorney who works with my foundation. We need to move quickly if we're going to recover the money and send a clear message. After the call ended, Marcus and I sat in thoughtful silence. The situation had shifted dramatically from last night's helpless devastation to this morning's sense of purposeful action. Are you sure about this? I asked. These are my parents we're talking about. Are you sure about letting them get away with it? Marcus countered. Luna, if you don't stand up for yourself now, when will you? And what message does it send to Dylan? That he can keep making terrible decisions because the family will always bail him out by stealing from you. The truth of his words stung, because I recognized the pattern so clearly now. How many times had I been the one asked to be understanding when Dylan screwed up? How many times had I been told that family comes first when it came to cleaning up his messes, but never when it came to supporting my goals and dreams? 2 hours later, we sat in Eleanor Hayes' downtown Portland office, a sophisticated space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Willamette River. Eleanor herself was an impressive woman in her early 50s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and eyes that seemed to see everything. She'd built her reputation on helping entrepreneurs succeed, but her foundation work focused on people trapped by family financial abuse. "David should be here momentarily," Eleanor said, offering us coffee from an expensive-looking machine. "In the meantime, let me explain what we've learned about your brother's situation." She opened a folder on her desk and pulled out several printed pages. Dylan Rodriguez, employed by TechFlow Solutions for the past 3 years, makes approximately $68,000 annually. He has defaulted on 2 car loans, has 3 credit cards maxed out at their limits, and according to his social media activity, has been involved in cryptocurrency trading for the past 8 months. I stared at the information, amazed at how quickly they'd gathered such detailed data. "How did you find all this?" "Public records, social media analysis, and some discreet inquiries through professional networks," Eleanor replied matter-of-factly. "The cryptocurrency trading is particularly interesting. Based on his online activity, he wasn't just making bad investments. He was day trading, which is essentially gambling with extra steps." Marcus leaned forward. "What about these people he supposedly owes money to? The ones making threats?" Eleanor's expression hardened. "That's where things get interesting. We found no evidence of any actual threats. No police reports, no documented harassment, no legitimate debt collection activities. In fact, Dylan's cryptocurrency losses appear to have been through legitimate trading platforms, not underground gambling operations." The implications hit me like cold water. "You're saying he lied about being threatened?" "I'm saying there's no evidence supporting his story about dangerous people demanding payment. It appears Dylan lost money through his own poor trading decisions and panicked. Rather than face the consequences, he created a crisis story designed to trigger your parents' protective instincts." David Chen arrived as Eleanor finished her explanation. A sharp-eyed man in his 40s, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to winning difficult cases. After introductions, he got straight to business. "I've reviewed the banking records Marcus provided," David said, settling into a chair beside Eleanor's desk. "Your parents clearly violated the terms of your account access. They had emergency contact privileges, not withdrawal authority. The bank should never have allowed them to take your money without your explicit consent." "What does that mean legally?" I asked. "It means the bank is liable for allowing unauthorized access to your funds. More importantly, it means your parents committed theft, regardless of their family relationship to you. Oregon law doesn't provide exceptions for family members when it comes to stealing money." Eleanor spread out several documents on her desk. "Here's what we propose. First, we file a formal complaint with the bank demanding immediate restoration of your funds. Second, we document everything properly in case criminal charges become necessary. Third, we give your parents an opportunity to make this right before we escalate further." "And if they refuse?" I asked. David's smile was thin but determined. "Then we pursue every legal avenue available: criminal charges for theft, civil action for emotional damages, and full documentation of the pattern of financial abuse for future protection." I felt overwhelmed by the speed at which everything was moving. Yesterday I'd been a victim of my family's betrayal. Today I was being offered the tools to fight back professionally and effectively. "What about Dylan? Does he face any consequences?" "That depends on how far you want to take this," Eleanor said. "If he lied about the threats to manipulate your parents into stealing from you, that's fraud. If he knew they were taking your money without consent, he's an accessory to theft. The question is what outcome you want." Marcus spoke up. "Luna wants her money back, and she wants this pattern to stop. Her parents need to understand that enabling Dylan's irresponsibility by stealing from her is unacceptable." "Then we start with a formal demand letter," David said. "Professional, legal, but clear about the consequences if they don't cooperate. Sometimes people need to see the serious legal terms spelled out before they understand what they've actually done." Eleanor pulled out a fresh folder and handed it to me. "This contains everything we've gathered so far. Documentation of the unauthorized withdrawal, analysis of Dylan's actual financial situation, research into the legitimacy of his claims about threats, and a timeline of his previous financial crises that your parents have enabled." I opened the folder, amazed at the thoroughness of their work. Charts showing Dylan's spending patterns, copies of his social media posts about cryptocurrency trading, bank records proving the withdrawal from my account was unauthorized, even screenshots of his online activity that contradicted his story about dangerous creditors. We've also reached out to Mrs. Catherine Walsh, your parents' neighbor. Eleanor continued. She mentioned seeing Dylan arrive at your parents' house in his car 2 weeks ago, staying for several hours, and leaving with what appeared to be a large envelope. Her testimony could be valuable if we need to establish a timeline. The level of detail was staggering. These people had taken my devastating family situation and transformed it into a carefully documented case with multiple sources of evidence. For the first time since receiving my mother's midnight text, I felt like I had real power in this situation. "What's our timeline?" Marcus asked. David consulted his calendar. "We can have the demand letter delivered tomorrow morning. Bank investigation will take 3 to 5 business days. If your parents cooperate, we could have your money restored within a week. And if they don't cooperate, then we file criminal charges and civil suits simultaneously. I've handled similar cases, and families who think they can steal from their children because family comes first tend to change their attitudes quickly when they're facing potential jail time." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. "Luna, I want you to understand something important. This isn't just about your wedding fund anymore. Your parents have established a pattern where Dylan's poor decisions result in you bearing the financial cost. If you don't stop it now, it will happen again. When he gets in trouble next time, and there will be a next time, they'll expect you to sacrifice again." The truth of her words resonated deeply. I thought about my childhood, my college years, the countless times I'd been asked to be understanding when Dylan got in trouble. The pattern was so clear now that someone had pointed it out. Dylan makes bad choices. Parents panic. Luna pays the price. "I want to stop it," I said firmly. "Not just for me, but because they're not helping Dylan by constantly rescuing him. They're enabling him to keep making terrible decisions." "Exactly," Eleanor said with approval. Real love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices. Your parents think they're protecting Dylan, but they're actually preventing him from learning and growing. Marcus reached over and squeezed my hand. "So we're doing this?" I looked around the room at these people who barely knew me but were willing to help me fight for justice. Eleanor, successful and powerful, using her resources to help someone escape family financial abuse. David, clearly skilled and experienced, taking on my case not because I could pay his usual rates but because it was the right thing to do. Marcus, my fiancé, who could have simply paid for our wedding himself, but understood that the principle mattered more than the money. "We're doing this," I confirmed. "My parents need to learn that stealing from me isn't an acceptable solution to Dylan's problems." Eleanor smiled with satisfaction. "Excellent. David will start drafting the demand letter this afternoon. Marcus, I'd like you to work with my financial analyst to make sure we have every detail of Dylan's actual situation documented. Luna, I want you to write down everything you remember about previous times your family asked you to sacrifice for Dylan's mistakes. Patterns matter in these situations." As we prepared to leave, Eleanor handed me her business card. "Luna, I want you to know that what you're doing takes courage. Family financial abuse continues because victims don't fight back, often out of misplaced loyalty. By standing up for yourself, you're not just protecting your own future, you're potentially helping other families recognize and stop similar patterns." Walking back to the car with Marcus, I felt transformed. 24 hours ago, I'd been devastated by my family's betrayal, feeling helpless and abandoned. Now I had a team of professionals working to not only recover my money, but to send a clear message that stealing from me would have serious consequences. "How are you feeling?" Marcus asked as we drove back toward our apartment. "Powerful," I said, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I have real power in my family dynamic." "You've always had power, Luna. You just needed the right support to use it." That afternoon, I spent 3 hours writing down every instance I could remember of being asked to sacrifice for Dylan's benefit. The list was longer and more disturbing than I'd expected. Birthday money given to help pay his speeding tickets. College graduation money contributed to his security deposit when he got evicted. Christmas gifts returned to stores so the money could go toward his credit card payments. A pattern spanning over a decade of my needs being secondary to his problems. Meanwhile, Marcus worked with Eleanor's financial analyst, building a comprehensive picture of Dylan's actual financial behavior. By evening, they'd created a timeline showing his pattern of risky financial decisions, followed by family bailouts, each rescue enabling the next crisis. David's demand letter was ready by 6 p.m. Professional, detailed, and uncompromising, it laid out exactly what my parents had done, why it was illegal, and what they needed to do to avoid criminal prosecution. The letter would be delivered the next morning by certified mail, ensuring they couldn't claim they hadn't received it. "Tomorrow changes everything," Marcus said as we reviewed the letter together. "Are you ready for this?" I thought about my parents, probably sitting at home believing they'd handled the Dylan crisis successfully. I thought about my brother, likely assuming he'd escaped consequences once again. They had no idea what was coming, no concept that their actions had legal and financial implications beyond their family dynamics. "I'm ready," I said. "They need to learn that I'm not their emergency fund for Dylan's poor decisions." Marcus smiled and pulled me close. "Tomorrow your family discovers they've been seriously underestimating you." As I fell asleep that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to my family relationships: anticipation instead of dread. For once, I wouldn't be the one sacrificing, understanding, or absorbing the cost of someone else's poor choices. For once, there would be consequences for treating me as less important than Dylan. Tomorrow would bring the demand letter, the bank investigation, and my family's first real understanding that stealing from me wasn't going to be tolerated anymore. They thought they'd solved their problem by taking my wedding fund. What they'd actually done was create a much bigger problem than they could have imagined. The reckoning was about to begin. The certified letter arrived at my parents' house at 9:47 a.m., according to the delivery confirmation David received on his phone. We were sitting in Eleanor's office conference room, surrounded by documents and laptops, when the notification came through. Marcus had taken the day off work, claiming he needed to be present for every step of this process. "Your parents have officially been served," David announced, showing us the delivery confirmation. "They have 72 hours to respond before we proceed with filing formal complaints with both the bank and the district attorney's office." I stared at the notification on his phone screen, feeling a mixture of anxiety and satisfaction. Somewhere across town, my parents were opening an envelope that would shatter their comfortable assumption that family loyalty meant I would quietly accept their theft. The letter was 10 pages long, meticulously detailed, and left no doubt about the seriousness of what they'd done. Eleanor's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and smiled grimly. "That was faster than expected. It's your mother, Luna." My stomach clenched. "Already?" "They probably called a lawyer immediately after reading the letter," David said. "Smart families usually do. The question is whether their lawyer will advise them to cooperate or fight." Eleanor declined the call, letting it go to voicemail. Let them sweat for a few hours. Panic makes people more likely to make mistakes, and we want them thinking clearly when we do talk. While we waited, Marcus worked with Eleanor's financial analyst to finalize their investigation into Dylan's cryptocurrency activities. What they'd discovered was even more damaging than we'd initially thought. Not only had Dylan lost the money through reckless day trading, but he'd actually been using borrowed funds to trade, amplifying his losses exponentially. "Look at this transaction history," the analyst said, pulling up spreadsheets on her laptop. "Dylan didn't just lose his own money. He borrowed against his credit cards to fund his trading account, took cash advances, even used one of those predatory payday loan services. By the time he approached your parents, he owed approximately $47,000, not $35,000. Marcus whistled low. "So taking Luna's wedding fund didn't even solve his problem completely." "Exactly. He's still in debt, still making minimum payments on maxed-out credit cards, still financially unstable. Your parents sacrificed your future for a partial solution to a problem Dylan created through gambling addiction." The term gambling addiction hit me hard because it accurately described Dylan's behavior patterns. The constant risk-taking, the belief that the next big win would solve everything, the inability to stop despite mounting losses. My parents had enabled an addict by stealing from me, and the addict was still using. David's phone rang shortly after noon. The caller ID showed a local law firm's number. "Showtime," he said, answering professionally. "David Chen speaking." I could only hear David's side of the conversation, but his expressions told the story. Initial politeness, growing firmness, and finally a thin smile that suggested the opposing attorney had just made a significant mistake. "I understand your client's position," David said into the phone. "However, theft is theft, regardless of family relationships. Your clients had no legal authority to withdraw those funds. Yes, I'm aware they're her parents. No, emergency contact status does not grant withdrawal privileges." "I see. Well, if that's their position, we'll proceed with criminal charges this afternoon." David listened for another minute, taking notes, before ending the call. "Their lawyer is named Robert Hernandez, and he's clearly hoping this will go away quietly. He suggested that family matters should be handled privately, not through the courts." "What did you tell him?" Eleanor asked. "That theft is a criminal matter, not a family matter, and that his clients committed a felony when they stole $35,000 from Luna's account." He seemed shocked that we're treating this seriously. I felt a surge of vindication. My parents had convinced themselves that taking my money was justified because Dylan needed help. They'd assumed I would be hurt, but ultimately understanding because family comes first. They'd never considered that their actions might have real legal consequences. Eleanor's assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Mrs. Hayes, there's a Patricia Rodriguez here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent regarding her daughter." Eleanor and David exchanged glances. "Send her up," Eleanor said. "This should be interesting." My mother arrived 5 minutes later, looking older and more frazzled than I'd ever seen her. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged as if she'd been crying. She wore the same clothes from yesterday, suggesting she'd spent a sleepless night wrestling with the implications of David's letter. "Luna, honey," she said upon seeing me, her voice breaking. "We need to talk privately, family to family." "Mrs. Rodriguez," Eleanor interrupted smoothly. "I'm Eleanor Hayes. Please, have a seat. This is David Chen, the attorney representing your daughter in this matter." My mother remained standing, her eyes fixed on me as if the other people in the room didn't exist. "Luna, you don't understand the position we were in. Dylan was desperate, scared. These people were threatening him." "What people, Mom?" I asked quietly. "We've investigated Dylan's situation thoroughly. There were no threats, no dangerous creditors, no emergency that justified stealing my wedding fund." My mother's face crumpled. "That's not true." "Dylan showed us messages, phone calls. He was terrified." David opened a folder and withdrew several printed pages. "Mrs. Rodriguez, we've examined your son's phone records, his social media activity, and his financial transactions. There's no evidence of any threats or contact from creditors beyond standard automated collection calls from legitimate companies." Quote, "He lost money through cryptocurrency day trading," Eleanor added gently but firmly. "That's essentially gambling, Mrs. Rodriguez. Your son has a gambling problem, and instead of getting him help, you enabled his addiction by stealing from Luna." My mother finally sat down, her composure completely shattered. "We were trying to protect our family. By destroying your daughter's trust and stealing her future?" Marcus spoke for the first time since my mother arrived. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Luna worked 4 years to save that money. She sacrificed countless things to afford the wedding she dreamed of. You took that away to bail out Dylan's gambling problem." "We thought we could pay her back," my mother whispered. "We thought if we could just get Dylan stable, we could replace the money before the wedding." David leaned forward. "With what money, Mrs. Rodriguez? Your family's financial records show you're living paycheck to paycheck. Your husband's accounting firm is barely profitable. And you have your own debts. There was never a realistic plan to repay Luna." The harsh truth of our family's financial situation laid bare in a sterile conference room felt surreal. My parents had always managed to maintain an appearance of middle-class stability, but apparently that appearance had been carefully constructed to hide a much more precarious reality. "What do you want?" my mother asked, looking directly at me for the first time. What will it take to make this go away? Complete restitution, Eleanor said before I could respond. $35,000 restored to Luna's account within 48 hours, plus interest and penalties for the unauthorized withdrawal. We don't have $35,000, my mother protested. Then you'll need to find it, David said matter-of-factly. Bank loan, mortgage refinance, asset liquidation. That's not our concern. You stole the money, you need to return it. My mother turned to me with desperate eyes. Luna, please. We're your parents. We love you. We made a mistake, but we can work this out as a family. For a moment, I felt the familiar pull of family guilt, the ingrained response to put family harmony above my own needs. Then I thought about 4 years of sacrifice, of working extra hours while my friends went out, of buying generic groceries and secondhand clothes to save for my dream wedding. I thought about Dylan, probably at home playing video games while I sat in a lawyer's office fighting to recover money he'd gambled away. Mom, where's Dylan right now? I asked. At home. He's very upset about all this. Is he looking for a second job to help repay what he stole? Is he selling his car, his gaming equipment, his cryptocurrency trading setup to make amends? My mother's silence answered my question. Has he even apologized to me directly? I continued. He feels terrible about what happened. That's not what I asked. Has Dylan personally apologized to me for gambling away money that he knew belonged to my wedding fund? My mother looked at her hands. He's afraid to call you. He doesn't know what to say. He doesn't know what to say because he's not actually sorry, Marcus said with conviction. He's upset that his gambling problem got exposed and that there are consequences. If he were truly sorry, he'd be here trying to make amends. Eleanor opened another folder. Mrs. Rodriguez, we need to discuss Dylan's pattern of financial irresponsibility and your pattern of enabling it. Our investigation shows this is the 7th time in 5 years that you've rescued Dylan from financial consequences. She spread out a timeline showing Dylan's various crises and my parents' responses. Car repossession avoided through parental intervention. Eviction prevented by family money. Credit card debts paid by parents. Student loan defaults covered by family funds. Each rescue followed by a brief period of stability before the next crisis. Every time you bail him out, you prevent him from learning from his mistakes. Eleanor continued, you're not helping Dylan by stealing from Luna. You're enabling his destructive behavior and ensuring it will continue. My mother stared at the timeline, seeing the pattern laid out in stark detail for the first time. We thought we were being good parents. Good parents teach their children to face consequences, David said. Good parents don't steal from one child to enable another child's addiction. The room fell silent for several minutes. My mother appeared to be processing not just the immediate crisis, but years of family dynamics that had led to this moment. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. What happens if we can't get the money back immediately? David consulted his notes. Criminal charges for theft, civil action for damages, and potential criminal charges for Dylan as an accessory. Oregon takes financial crimes seriously, especially when they involve family manipulation. And if we cooperate, full restitution within 48 hours, written agreement that Dylan will enter financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment, and assurance that this pattern ends permanently, Eleanor replied. My mother absorbed this information slowly. I need to talk to your father and Dylan. Mrs. Rodriguez, I said as she prepared to leave, I want you to understand something. This isn't about punishing you or Dylan. This is about stopping a pattern that's been destroying our family for years. Dylan needs help, not enablement. And I need to know that my parents won't steal from me again the next time he gets in trouble. My mother nodded, tears flowing freely now. I never thought of it as stealing. I thought we were managing a family crisis. Taking someone's money without permission is stealing, regardless of the relationship, David said gently. The law doesn't make exceptions for family members. After my mother left, the conference room felt charged with tension. Eleanor was the first to speak. She'll be back within 6 hours with a counterproposal, probably asking for more time to repay or suggesting a payment plan. What do we do then? I asked. We stick to our terms, David said firmly. 48 hours for full restitution. The moment we start negotiating timelines, we lose our leverage. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a banking app. Luna, we could end this right now. I could transfer the money to your account, and we could proceed with our wedding plans without any more family drama. I looked at the screen showing his substantial account balance, knowing he was absolutely right. Marcus could solve this financial problem with a few keystrokes, but that would mean my parents faced no real consequences for their actions. Dylan learned nothing from his mistakes, and the pattern would continue until the next crisis. That's not the point anymore, I said, echoing his words from yesterday. This isn't about the money. It's about stopping them from treating me like their personal bailout fund for Dylan's problems. Eleanor smiled approvingly. Exactly right. If you let Marcus solve this financially, your parents learn that their actions had no real consequences. Dylan learns that someone will always rescue him. And you learn that your needs will always be secondary to family harmony. David's phone buzzed with a text message. He read it and looked up with a grim expression. Robert Hernandez wants to schedule a meeting for this afternoon. Apparently your parents are taking this more seriously now. Good, Eleanor said. Fear of criminal prosecution tends to clarify people's priorities quickly. While we waited for the afternoon meeting, Marcus and I took a walk along the waterfront near Eleanor's office. The afternoon sun felt warm on our faces, but I could barely appreciate the beautiful day. My mind was consumed with thoughts of my family, sitting around their dining room table, probably arguing about whose fault this was and how to make it go away. Do you think I'm being too harsh? I asked Marcus as we sat on a bench overlooking the river. I think you're being exactly as harsh as the situation requires, he replied. Luna, your parents committed a crime. They stole money from their own daughter to enable their son's gambling addiction. If you don't stand up for yourself now, when will you? But they're my parents. They raised me, loved me, supported me through college, and now they've betrayed that love by stealing from you. Love doesn't justify theft, Luna. Good intentions don't excuse criminal behavior. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for my family's dysfunction, all the times I'd absorbed the cost of Dylan's poor decisions to maintain family peace. The pattern was so ingrained that even now, with professional support and clear evidence of wrongdoing, I still felt guilty for holding them accountable. Eleanor was right about the pattern, wasn't she? I said. This will happen again if I don't stop it now. Marcus nodded. Dylan will get in trouble again because he always does, and your parents will look for money to bail him out. If you don't have savings to steal, they'll ask you to co-sign loans, or guilt you into giving them your tax refund, or find some other way to make his problems your financial responsibility. The truth of his words felt like ice in my veins. I could see the future he described clearly because it matched the past so perfectly. Dylan's next crisis, my parents. Next plea for family solidarity. My next sacrifice for the greater good of family harmony. I won't let that happen, I said firmly. Whatever it takes to stop this pattern, I'll do it. Marcus squeezed my hand. Good. Because you deserve parents who protect your dreams, not parents who steal them to enable your brother's addictions. We returned to Eleanor's office to find David preparing for the afternoon meeting with my parents' attorney. He'd arranged the conference room strategically, with documents spread across the table in a way that would immediately communicate the strength of our case. They'll try to make this emotional, David warned. Family obligations, guilt about destroying relationships, appeals to forgiveness and understanding. We need to stay focused on the facts and the law. Eleanor nodded in agreement. Remember, Luna, you're not destroying your family. Your parents destroyed your trust when they stole from you. You're simply holding them accountable for their choices. At 3 o'clock, Robert Hernandez arrived with my father and Dylan in tow. My mother was notably absent, probably too emotional to participate in legal negotiations. My father looked haggard and older than his 62 years. Dylan appeared sullen and defensive, clearly resentful about being forced to face consequences for his actions. "Let's dispense with pleasantries," Hernandez said as soon as everyone was seated. "My clients acknowledge that mistakes were made, but they believe criminal prosecution is an extreme response to a family misunderstanding." David didn't even blink. "Mr. Hernandez, your clients committed theft. $35,000 taken without authorization from the account holder. There was no misunderstanding. There was a deliberate decision to steal money that didn't belong to them. The money was taken to address a family emergency," Hernandez countered. "What emergency?" Eleanor interjected, opening her folder of Dylan's financial records. "Dylan Rodriguez lost money gambling on cryptocurrency. That's not an emergency, that's the predictable consequence of addiction and poor judgment." My father spoke for the first time. Dylan was in real danger. These people were threatening him. David slid a printed report across the table. "Mr. Rodriguez, we've investigated your son's claims thoroughly. There were no threats, no dangerous creditors, no emergency situation. Dylan lost money gambling and panicked when he couldn't cover his losses." Dylan finally looked up from the table, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. Luna, we're family. You can't seriously be thinking about sending Mom and Dad to jail over money." The audacity of his statement stunned me. After gambling away money he knew belonged to my wedding fund, after lying to our parents about being threatened, after sitting silently while they stole from me to cover his mistakes, Dylan had the nerve to make me the villain for seeking justice. "Dylan," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "you gambled away my wedding fund and then lied to our parents to manipulate them into stealing from me. You haven't apologized, you haven't offered to make amends, and you haven't taken any responsibility for your actions. What exactly makes you think you're the victim here?" "I never asked them to take your money," Dylan protested weakly. Marcus leaned forward. "But you accepted it, didn't you? You knew where that $35,000 came from, and you used it anyway." Hernandez intervened before Dylan could respond. "Perhaps we can discuss a reasonable resolution. My clients are willing to commit to a repayment plan." 48 hours, David said flatly. "Full restitution within 48 hours, or we file criminal charges." "That's impossible," my father said desperately. "We don't have that kind of cash available." Eleanor opened another folder. "Mr. Rodriguez, your accounting firm owns commercial property worth approximately $120,000. You have equity in your home of roughly $80,000. You have retirement accounts, business assets, personal property. You have resources. You want us to destroy our financial future to fix this?" my father asked incredulously. "You destroyed your financial future when you stole from your daughter," Marcus replied coldly. "Now you need to fix what you broke." The meeting continued for another hour, with Hernandez proposing various compromise solutions and David rejecting each one. Payment plans? Reduced amounts, family mediation, therapy instead of criminal prosecution. David's position never wavered. Full restitution within 48 hours, or criminal prosecution would proceed. Finally, Hernandez requested a private conference with his clients. They stepped out of the room, leaving us alone to discuss strategy. "They'll cave," Eleanor predicted confidently. "Hernandez knows they have no legal defense. The evidence is overwhelming, and the consequences of criminal prosecution are too severe to risk." David nodded in agreement. "Hernandez is a good lawyer. He'll advise them that fighting this is financial suicide. Even if they somehow avoided criminal conviction, the legal fees alone would bankrupt them." When they returned, Hernandez looked resigned. "My clients agree to full restitution within 48 hours. And the other conditions?" David pressed. Hernandez consulted his notes. "Dylan will enter financial counseling and gambling addiction treatment. The family agrees to end the pattern of financial enablement. And there will be no retaliation against Luna for pursuing this matter legally." David made notes on his legal pad. "We'll need all of this in writing, signed by all parties, and notarized. The restitution must be completed before the other agreements take effect." As the meeting concluded, my father approached me one final time. Luna, I hope you understand that we were trying to do what we thought was best for the family. Dad, I hope you understand that stealing from me was never what was best for anyone, I replied. Dylan needed help with his gambling problem, not enablement. I needed parents who would protect my future, not sacrifice it for family peace. Walking out of that conference room, I felt something I'd never experienced in my relationship with my family: equality. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the family member expected to sacrifice for everyone else's benefit. I wasn't the responsible daughter who had to understand and forgive and absorb the costs of other people's poor choices. Tomorrow would bring the wire transfer that restored my wedding fund, but more importantly, it would mark the end of a pattern that had defined my family relationships for decades. Dylan would finally face real consequences for his actions. My parents would learn that love doesn't justify theft. And I would begin planning my wedding with the knowledge that I'd fought for my own future and won. The reckoning had arrived, and for once, justice was on my side. The wire transfer notification arrived at 10:23 a.m. on Friday, exactly 47 hours and 16 minutes after the legal deadline we'd set. My phone buzzed with a banking alert showing $35,000 deposited into my wedding fund account, plus an additional $3,000 in interest and penalty fees that David had negotiated as part of the settlement. I stared at the notification for a long moment, feeling strangely hollow rather than victorious. The money was back, the legal crisis was resolved, but something fundamental had shifted in my relationship with my family that couldn't be repaired by a bank transfer. Marcus found me sitting at our kitchen table, still holding my phone, tears I hadn't expected streaming down my face. "The money came through," I said, showing him the notification. He sat beside me and pulled me close. "Then why do you look so sad?" "Because I just realized that getting my money back doesn't fix what's broken between us," I whispered. "My parents chose Dylan over me. They would have let me lose my dream wedding to cover his gambling debts. That knowledge doesn't disappear just because they were forced to return what they stole." The weight of this realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. I'd been so focused on recovering the money and stopping the pattern of financial abuse that I hadn't fully processed the emotional devastation of my family's betrayal. They'd been willing to sacrifice my future happiness without hesitation, and only legal pressure had changed their minds. Marcus held me while I cried, not offering empty reassurances or trying to minimize my pain. He understood that this victory came with a profound loss. The loss of the family I'd thought I had, the loving parents I'd believed would protect my dreams rather than sacrifice them. Eleanor called an hour later to check on us. "I heard the funds were transferred successfully," she said when Marcus put her on speaker. "How are you processing everything, Luna?" "I'm grateful that you helped me get justice," I said, wiping my eyes. "But I'm also grieving the parents I thought I had. The people who would steal from their daughter's wedding fund aren't the people I believed raised me." "That's a normal response," Eleanor said gently. "Many of my clients go through a similar grieving process. You're mourning the loss of an illusion about your family dynamics that probably protected you for years." "What do you mean?" "You probably told yourself that your parents' favoritism toward Dylan was justified because he needed more help. You likely convinced yourself that being asked to sacrifice for family harmony was normal and healthy. Discovering that they would steal from you forces you to confront the reality that those weren't loving family dynamics. They were dysfunctional patterns that harmed you." Eleanor's analysis cut deep because it was so accurate. I had spent years making excuses for my family's treatment, convincing myself that being the reliable daughter meant always being the one who gave up things for others. I'd told myself that love meant understanding when Dylan got in trouble again, that maturity meant accepting financial sacrifices for family peace. The hardest part, I admitted, is realizing how long this has been going on. It wasn't just about the wedding fund. It's been 28 years of me coming second to Dylan's needs. Marcus squeezed my hand. "But that pattern ends now. You've shown them there are consequences for treating you that way." David joined our conversation via conference call to discuss the final legal paperwork. "Dylan is scheduled to begin financial counseling next Monday," he reported. "The gambling addiction treatment program starts the following week. Both are conditions of the settlement agreement." "Do you think he'll actually follow through?" I asked. He doesn't have a choice. Violation of the settlement terms would trigger the criminal charges we agreed to suspend. His parents know this, and they'll make sure he complies rather than risk prosecution. What about my parents? Are they facing any other consequences? David paused thoughtfully. The bank has opened an internal investigation into how they allowed unauthorized access to your account. Depending on their findings, your parents might face additional banking restrictions or penalties. After the calls ended, Marcus and I spent the afternoon doing something we hadn't been able to do for weeks, actually planning our wedding. With the funds restored, we could confirm vendors, finalize menu selections, and order the flowers I'd been dreaming about. But the excitement felt muted, overshadowed by the family drama that had nearly derailed everything. I keep wondering if they'll even come to the wedding, I said as we reviewed our guest list. After everything that's happened, I can't imagine sitting at the same table pretending everything is normal. Do you want them there? Marcus asked carefully. I considered the question seriously. Did I want my parents at my wedding after learning they would steal from me to enable Dylan's gambling addiction? Did I want Dylan there, knowing he'd shown no genuine remorse for his actions? Could I walk down the aisle knowing that the people who should have been my biggest supporters had been willing to sacrifice my happiness without hesitation? I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me wants them there because they're my family, and this is supposed to be a celebration. But another part of me thinks their presence would taint the whole day with reminders of their betrayal. My phone rang before Marcus could respond. My mother's number appeared on the screen, the first time she'd called since the disastrous legal meeting. I hesitated, then answered. Luna, honey. My mother's voice was weak, uncertain. I was hoping we could talk. Your father and we want to apologize properly for everything that happened. Mom, the money has been returned. The legal matter is settled. What more is there to discuss? Our relationship, she said, her voice breaking. Luna, I can't bear the thought that we've lost you over this. You're our daughter, and we love you. The word love struck me painfully. Mom, people who love me don't steal from me. People who love me don't sacrifice my dreams to enable Dylan's gambling problem. We made a terrible mistake, she said through tears. We were panicked about Dylan's situation, and we made the wrong choice. But it was never about loving you less than Dylan. Wasn't it? I asked, surprised by the sharpness in my own voice. When has Dylan ever been asked to sacrifice anything for my benefit? When have you ever taken money from his account to solve one of my problems? The silence on the other end of the line answered my question more clearly than words could have. Luna, my mother finally said, we want to make this right. Not just the money, but our relationship. Will you at least consider family counseling? All of us together, working through these issues? I looked at Marcus, who was listening intently to my side of the conversation. His expression suggested he thought family therapy might be worthwhile, but he was leaving the decision entirely to me. I'll think about it, I said, which was more than I'd expected to offer when the call began. And the wedding invitation? Are we still welcome? The question I'd been dreading hung in the air between us. I don't know, Mom. I need time to figure out if I can handle having you there after everything that's happened. After ending the call, I felt emotionally exhausted. The legal victory had been clear-cut, but the family relationships were infinitely more complicated. My parents were genuinely remorseful now that they faced consequences. But was that remorse about their actions or just about getting caught? What are you thinking? Marcus asked, studying my face. I'm thinking that I want to talk to Eleanor about family therapy. Not because I'm ready to forgive and forget, but because I need to understand whether there's any possibility of a healthy relationship with them going forward. Marcus nodded. That seems wise. You don't have to decide anything immediately. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. Dylan stood at our apartment door, looking genuinely contrite for the first time since this crisis began. His usual cocky demeanor was gone, replaced by someone who appeared to have spent sleepless nights wrestling with uncomfortable truths about himself. Luna, can I come in? I need to talk to you. Against my better judgment, I let him into our living room. Marcus remained close, his protective instincts clearly activated by Dylan's presence. "I want to apologize," Dylan said without preamble. "Not the bullshit apology I should have given weeks ago, but a real one. I gambled away money that belonged to your wedding, lied to our parents about being threatened, and then sat silently while they stole from you to cover my mistakes." I stared at him, shocked by the directness of his admission. This wasn't the Dylan who made excuses, blamed circumstances, or charmed his way out of consequences. The financial counselor made me write down every lie I told during this whole mess, he continued. There were 17 separate lies, Luna. 17 times I chose deception over taking responsibility. Our parents committed a crime because I manipulated them with fake stories about being in danger. Marcus leaned forward. "What changed, Dylan? 2 weeks ago you were angry at Luna for pursuing legal action. Now you're taking responsibility?" Dylan's laugh was bitter. 2 weeks ago I was still hoping someone else would clean up my mess. The gambling addiction counselor helped me understand that I've been using our family's dysfunction to avoid consequences for years. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I knew Mom and Dad would always rescue me because that's what they did. I knew you would always be understanding because that's who you are. I've been taking advantage of both dynamics to avoid growing up and facing my problems." The honesty was startling, but I remained cautious. Dylan had demonstrated a talent for saying whatever people wanted to hear, and I wasn't ready to trust this apparent transformation. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now I enter a residential gambling addiction treatment program. 60 days minimum, possibly longer depending on my progress. I've already arranged leave from work, and I'm selling my car, my gaming equipment, and anything else of value to help repay what I cost the family." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Residential treatment? That's more intensive than what the settlement required." "The settlement required counseling and outpatient treatment." Dylan confirmed. "But I requested residential because I don't trust myself to stay in recovery without intensive support. I've been gambling in some form since college, Luna. This isn't just about cryptocurrency losses. It's about a pattern of risky behavior that's been escalating for years." I felt a flicker of hope for the first time since this nightmare began. Not hope for our relationship necessarily, but hope that Dylan might actually get the help he needed to become a healthier person. "Have you told Mom and Dad about the residential treatment?" Dylan nodded. "They're scared about the cost, but I told them this is my responsibility now. I've hurt this family enough by letting them enable my problems." "The cost isn't your only responsibility," I said firmly. "You need to understand that what happened between us changed everything. Getting treatment doesn't automatically restore trust or repair relationships." "I know," Dylan said quietly. The counselor explained that recovery is about changing my behavior, not about getting other people to forgive me. Whether you ever trust me again is your choice to make based on my actions over time, not my promises today. This response surprised me more than anything else he'd said. The Dylan I knew would have immediately started making promises about how he'd changed, how things would be different, how I should give him another chance. This version acknowledged that trust had to be earned through consistent behavior over time. After Dylan left, Marcus and I sat together processing this unexpected development. "Do you believe he's sincere?" Marcus asked. "I think he's sincere about wanting to change," I said carefully. "But addiction recovery is complicated. And family dynamics are even more complicated. Even if Dylan gets completely clean and becomes a different person, that doesn't erase what happened or automatically fix our relationship. And your parents? That's even more complicated. Dylan has an addiction that explains his behavior, even if it doesn't excuse it. But Mom and Dad don't have that excuse. They made a conscious choice to steal from me, and I'm not sure therapy can fix the fundamental values difference that choice revealed." That afternoon, Eleanor called to check on our progress and discuss potential family therapy options. "I work with several therapists who specialize in financial abuse within families," she said. "The key is finding someone who won't minimize what happened or rush you toward forgiveness before you're ready." "I'm not sure I'll ever be ready for complete forgiveness," I admitted. "Is that wrong?" "Not at all," Eleanor said firmly. Forgiveness isn't required for healing, Luna. You can process your trauma, establish healthy boundaries, and move forward with your life without forgiving people who betrayed your trust. The goal is your emotional well-being, not maintaining family harmony at the expense of your mental health. This perspective felt liberating. I'd been raised to believe that forgiveness was always the right choice, that holding grudges was harmful and immature. Eleanor was suggesting that protecting myself from people who had demonstrated they would harm me might be the healthier choice. What if family therapy reveals that reconciliation isn't possible? I asked. Then you'll have clarity about that relationship and can make informed decisions about your future, Eleanor replied. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is accept that certain people aren't safe for you to have in your life, even if they're family. That evening, Marcus and I made two important decisions. First, we would attend family therapy sessions, not to work toward reconciliation necessarily, but to better understand the family dynamics and make informed choices about future relationships. Second, we would postpone deciding about wedding invitations until after several therapy sessions gave us more insight into whether healthy relationships were possible. I love that we're making these decisions together, I told Marcus as we prepared for bed. For so many years, family decisions were made for me or around me, but never with me having equal input. That changes now, Marcus said, holding me close. In our marriage, you'll never be the one expected to sacrifice your needs for someone else's convenience. We're partners, equals, and we protect each other's dreams. As I fell asleep that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this crisis began: genuine peace. Not because everything was resolved, but because I finally had agency in my family relationships. I was no longer the daughter who absorbed costs and accepted sacrifices for family harmony. I was a woman who had fought for her own future and won, regardless of what that meant for family dynamics. The money was restored, the legal battle was over, and the hard work of rebuilding or redefining family relationships was just beginning. But for the first time in weeks, the future felt like something I was actively creating, rather than something happening to me. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, and complex decisions about forgiveness and boundaries. But tonight, I was simply grateful to be marrying a man who had shown me what it meant to have someone truly on my side, fighting for my dreams rather than asking me to sacrifice them. The transformation was complete. I was no longer the family member who came last in everyone's priorities. I was someone worthy of protection, respect, and equal consideration. And I would never again allow anyone, family or otherwise, to convince me otherwise. 6 weeks later, I stood in the bridal suite of the historic Columbia River Gorge mansion, watching my reflection in the antique mirror as my best friend Sarah adjusted the delicate lace sleeves of my wedding dress. The gown was everything I'd dreamed of: elegant, timeless, and paid for with money I'd earned through years of dedication and sacrifice. Money that had been stolen and returned, but more importantly, money that represented my refusal to accept being treated as less important than my brother's gambling addiction. "You look absolutely radiant," Sarah said, stepping back to admire the final result. "Marcus is going to lose his mind when he sees you." I smiled, feeling a genuine happiness that had been absent during the dark weeks of family crisis. The wedding was proceeding exactly as Marcus and I had planned, with every detail reflecting our shared vision, rather than compromises forced by financial theft. The flowers were the pale pink peonies I'd always imagined. The menu featured the locally sourced cuisine we'd selected together, and the string quartet was playing the classical pieces we'd chosen during happier times. "Are you nervous about today?" Sarah asked, sensing some lingering tension despite my outward calm. "Not about marrying Marcus," I said honestly. "I'm nervous about the family situation." After 6 weeks of intensive family therapy sessions, Marcus and I had made difficult decisions about wedding invitations that still felt surreal. My parents would be attending, but under strict conditions we'd established through therapeutic guidance. Dylan would not be present, as he was still in residential addiction treatment and wouldn't be released for another month. The absence of my brother felt both painful and relieving. Painful because family weddings should include family, relieving because his presence would have been a constant reminder of the chaos he'd created. The therapy sessions had been revealing in ways I hadn't expected. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the family counselor Eleanor had recommended, specialized in financial abuse and family dysfunction. Over the course of our meetings, she'd helped uncover patterns that went back to my childhood, long before Dylan's gambling addiction became apparent. Luna has been cast in the family role of the responsible caretaker, Dr. Walsh had explained during one particularly intense session. This dynamic trained her to absorb emotional and financial costs to maintain family stability, while Dylan was enabled to avoid consequences through parental rescue. My parents had struggled with these revelations. My father, in particular, had difficulty accepting that their financial rescue pattern had actually harmed, rather than helped Dylan. "We thought we were being loving parents," he'd protested during one session. "Love isn't measured by how much you rescue someone from their mistakes," Dr. Walsh had replied. "Real love sometimes means allowing people to face consequences so they can learn and grow." The therapy had also revealed the extent to which my parents' fear of Dylan's potential failure had driven their enabling behavior. They'd convinced themselves that each rescue would be the last one, that eventually Dylan would stabilize and the crisis pattern would end naturally. They'd never considered that their interventions were actually perpetuating the cycles of irresponsible behavior. What about Luna's needs during all these crises? Dr. Walsh had asked during another session, when Dylan was in trouble, who considered the impact on Luna's financial goals, emotional well-being, or life plans? The silence from my parents had been deafening. In 28 years of Dylan's various crises, my needs had rarely factored into their rescue decisions. I was simply expected to understand, to sacrifice, to put family harmony above personal goals. Now, as I prepared to walk down the aisle, those therapy sessions felt like ancient history. My parents had agreed to attend the wedding with full understanding that their relationship with me was fundamentally changed. They'd acknowledged the harm they'd caused, committed to different patterns going forward, and accepted that rebuilding trust would be a long process measured in years, not months. "The photographer wants to take some final shots before the ceremony," Sarah announced, checking her phone. "Are you ready?" I took one last look in the mirror, seeing not just a bride but a woman who had fought for her own future and won. The person looking back at me had discovered her own strength during the darkest family crisis she'd ever faced. She'd learned to stand up for herself, to demand respect, and to refuse acceptance of behavior that harmed her. "I'm ready," I said, and meant it completely. The photographer, a talented artist Marcus and I, had hired with funds from my restored wedding account, captured beautiful images of me in the bridal suite. Each photo represented a victory over the family members who had nearly destroyed this day through their betrayal and theft. These weren't just wedding photos. They were documentation of a dream that had survived attempted sabotage. Marcus's best man knocked on the door as we finished the photography session. "Luna, Marcus wanted me to give you this," he said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in Marcus's familiar handwriting. Inside was a letter that brought tears to my eyes. "My dearest Luna, as I write this on the morning of our wedding, I'm overwhelmed with admiration for the strength and grace you've shown during the most difficult weeks of our relationship. Watching you fight for your dreams, refuse to accept injustice, and stand up to family members who had taken advantage of your kindness for years has only deepened my love and respect for you. Today we're not just celebrating our love, we're celebrating your transformation into someone who will never again allow others to treat her as less important than she truly is. I promise to spend our marriage supporting your dreams, protecting your interests, and ensuring you never again face betrayal alone. You are the strongest, most remarkable woman I know, and I can't wait to call you my wife. All my love, Marcus." I carefully folded the letter and tucked it into my bouquet, carrying his words with me as I prepared to join my future husband at the altar. The ceremony processional began with Sarah walking down the aisle, followed by Marcus's sister and my cousin Emma, who had flown in from Seattle. As the string quartet began the opening notes of Pachelbel's canon, I took my father's arm for the traditional walk down the aisle. "Luna," my father said quietly as we waited for our cue, "I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become. Not just today, but over these past weeks. You showed courage I didn't know you possessed." I looked at him, this man who had raised me but had also betrayed me, trying to reconcile the loving father of my childhood with the person who had stolen from my wedding fund. "Thank you, Dad. I hope we can build something healthier going forward." "We will," he said with conviction. "Your mother and I understand now that love means protecting your dreams, not sacrificing them for others." The doors to the ceremony space opened, revealing a breathtaking scene that Marcus and I had planned together during happier times. White chairs arranged in elegant rows, flowering archways creating a romantic canopy, and guests who had gathered to celebrate our union rather than witness family drama. Eleanor Hayes sat in the third row, beaming with pride at seeing the woman she'd helped find her strength. David Chen was present with his wife, having become more than just our attorney during the crisis. But most importantly, Marcus waited at the altar in his perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his eyes bright with love and anticipation. As I walked toward him, I felt the weight of recent struggles lifting away, replaced by excitement for the future we would build together. The ceremony itself was everything we'd envisioned. We'd written our own vows, words that took on deeper meaning after surviving the test of family betrayal and legal battles. When Marcus promised to quote, and defend your interests as my own, several guests wiped away tears, understanding the specific significance of those words. When I promised to means supporting each other's growth, I was speaking directly to lessons learned during our recent crisis. The moment when the officiant pronounced us husband and wife felt like more than a wedding ceremony. It felt like a declaration of independence from family dynamics that had constrained me for decades. I was no longer Luna Rodriguez, the daughter expected to sacrifice for family harmony. I was Luna Thompson, a woman who had fought for her own future and won. The reception celebration was joyous and emotional. Eleanor gave a toast that moved everyone to tears, speaking about the courage required to stand up to family financial abuse and the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who celebrate rather than sabotage our successes. To Luna and Marcus, Eleanor concluded, raising her champagne glass, who have shown us that real love means protecting each other's dreams, not sacrificing them for others. Convenience. My parents remained mostly quiet during the reception, clearly still processing the changes in our family dynamic. They spoke politely with other guests, danced together during the traditional songs, and seemed genuinely happy to see me celebrating my wedding day. But there was also a subdued quality to their presence, an understanding that their relationship with me would never return to what it had been before. During the father-daughter dance, my dad spoke quietly about his hopes for the future. "I know we have a lot of work to do to rebuild your trust," he said as we swayed to the music. "But I want you to know that we're committed to doing that work, however long it takes." "I appreciate that, Dad. But I also need you to understand that trust is earned through consistent actions over time, not through apologies or promises." He nodded solemnly. Dr. Walsh has made that very clear. We're learning to show love through respect, rather than through enabling and rescue. The most emotional moment of the reception came when Marcus and I shared our first dance as husband and wife. The song was At Last by Etta James, chosen because it represented not just our love story, but also my personal journey to finding someone who truly had my best interests at heart. As we danced, Marcus whispered in my ear, "I'm so proud of you for everything you've accomplished, not just today but over these past weeks. You've become even more amazing than I thought possible." "I couldn't have done it without your support," I whispered back. "You showed me what it means to have someone truly on my side." "Always," he promised. "For the rest of our lives." The evening continued with dancing, speeches from friends who had witnessed our relationship grow, and celebration that felt genuinely joyful rather than overshadowed by family drama. Marcus's business partners attended, along with several people from Eleanor's foundation who had become invested in our story. The guest list represented people who had supported our love rather than threatened it. Around midnight, as the reception wound down, my mother approached me for a private conversation. She looked older than I remembered, worn down by weeks of confronting uncomfortable truths about our family dynamics. "Luna, I wanted to thank you for allowing us to be here today," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know we didn't deserve invitations after what we did. You're here because Dr. Walsh thought it was important for our healing process," I replied honestly. "But I'm glad you came. I wanted you to see what you almost destroyed." My mother nodded, tears flowing freely. "We understand now that what we did was theft, not love. We understand that we've been enabling Dylan's problems rather than helping him. And we understand that we damaged our relationship with you in ways that might never be completely repaired. The damage might not be completely repaired." I agreed. "But that doesn't mean we can't build something new and healthier going forward." "What would that look like?" she asked hopefully. "It would look like you respecting my boundaries, supporting my goals, and never again treating me as a resource to solve Dylan's problems. It would look like understanding that being my mother doesn't give you the right to make financial decisions about my life." "We can do that," she said firmly. "We will do that. Actions, Mom. I need to see consistent actions over time, not promises made at my wedding." After my parents left, Marcus and I spent a few quiet moments with Eleanor and David, the people who had transformed my family crisis from a devastating betrayal into an opportunity for justice and growth. "How does it feel to be married?" Eleanor asked with a warm smile. "It feels like the beginning of something completely new," I said. "Not just marriage, but a life where I'm treated as an equal partner, rather than a supporting character in other people's dramas." David raised his champagne glass one final time. "To Luna, who discovered that sometimes the best way to save your family is to refuse to enable their dysfunction." As Marcus and I finally departed for our honeymoon suite, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought us to this moment. 6 weeks ago, I had been devastated by my family's betrayal, feeling powerless and abandoned. Tonight I was beginning my marriage as a woman who had fought for her own future and discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. The wedding fund that had been stolen and recovered represented more than money. It represented my refusal to accept being treated as less important than my brother's gambling addiction. Every flower arrangement, every piece of wedding cake, every moment of celebration had been earned through courage and determination. "No regrets?" Marcus asked as we entered our honeymoon suite, a beautiful room overlooking the Columbia River. "No regrets," I confirmed. "About any of it. Standing up to my family was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most important. What happens next with Dylan and your parents?" I considered the question carefully. "Dylan has about a month left in treatment, and then we'll see if he's genuinely committed to recovery, or if this was just another manipulation. My parents are continuing therapy to understand how they enabled his addiction. As for our relationships, those will be rebuilt slowly based on their actions, not their words. And if they don't change, then I'll have clarity about what kind of relationships are possible with them, and I'll make decisions based on what's healthy for us, rather than what maintains family harmony." Marcus nodded approvingly. "I love that you're prioritizing our well-being rather than managing everyone else's emotions." "I learned from the best," I said, remembering how Marcus had stood beside me through every difficult moment, supporting my fight for justice rather than pressuring me to maintain peace. As we prepared for bed on our wedding night, I felt profound gratitude for the crisis that had nearly destroyed our wedding plans. Without that betrayal, I might never have discovered my own strength. I might have continued accepting family dysfunction as normal, sacrificing my needs for others, convenience, and believing that love meant absorbing costs to maintain harmony. Instead, I'd learned that real love means protecting each other's dreams, that family relationships require mutual respect and boundaries, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's destructive behavior. "Thank you," I said to Marcus as we settled into bed together as husband and wife. "For what?" "For showing me what it means to have someone truly support my goals instead of asking me to sacrifice them. For standing beside me during the hardest fight of my life. For proving that love means partnership and protection, not enablement and sacrifice." Marcus pulled me close, and I felt the safety and security of being with someone who truly had my best interests at heart. "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Watching you fight for yourself taught me so much about courage and integrity." 6 months later, Dylan completed his residential treatment program and returned to Portland, a genuinely changed person. The gambling addiction counseling had helped him understand not just his addiction patterns, but also the family dynamics that had enabled his irresponsible behavior for years. He'd gotten a second job to help repay debts, sold most of his possessions to fund his recovery, and was attending daily support group meetings. More importantly, he'd stopped expecting family members to rescue him from consequences. When his car needed expensive repairs he couldn't afford, he took public transportation instead of asking our parents for money. When his apartment lease was up and he couldn't afford the rent increase, he found a smaller place rather than moving back home. Small actions, but ones that demonstrated genuine change in his approach to personal responsibility. My parents continued therapy and gradually began rebuilding trust through consistent actions rather than words. They stopped calling with updates about Dylan's problems, respecting the boundary I'd established about not being involved in his crises. They started remembering my birthday and anniversary without being reminded, small gestures that showed they were learning to prioritize our relationship independently of Dylan's needs. Most significantly, when Dylan had a minor relapse 6 months after treatment and gambled away 2 weeks' pay, my parents called his addiction counselor rather than offering financial rescue. They'd learned that enabling his addiction wasn't loving support, it was harmful interference with his recovery process. Marcus and I bought our first house using savings we'd accumulated together, plus a substantial bonus from his company's latest acquisition offer. We'd learned to make financial decisions as equal partners, with both of our goals and dreams receiving equal consideration. The wedding fund crisis had taught us the importance of financial transparency and mutual respect in money matters. Eleanor became an ongoing friend and mentor, involving me in her foundation's work helping other families escape financial abuse patterns. Sharing my story with other victims helped me process my own trauma, while providing hope for people trapped in similar situations. Many families believed that love required accepting financial exploitation from relatives, and hearing about my successful fight for justice helped them understand that boundaries and consequences were actually expressions of healthy love. David remained our family attorney, helping us establish proper estate planning and financial protections. The legal documents he prepared ensured that our assets would always be protected from family members who might view our success as a resource for their personal crises. 1 year after our wedding, Marcus and I hosted a small anniversary dinner at our new home. Eleanor and David attended, along with close friends who had supported us through our journey. My parents were invited and attended, marking the first time they'd been in our home since the wedding fund crisis. During dinner, my father made a toast that acknowledged how much our family dynamics had changed. To Luna and Marcus, who taught us that real love means celebrating each other's success, rather than viewing it as a resource to solve other people's problems. My mother added her own words, and to Luna specifically, for having the courage to stand up for herself when we failed to protect her interests. You saved our family by refusing to enable our dysfunction. These acknowledgments felt genuine rather than performative, backed by a year of consistent actions that demonstrated real change in their approach to family relationships. They'd learned to support my goals rather than treating my success as a family resource, and they'd stopped enabling Dylan's problems through financial rescue. Dylan himself wasn't present at the anniversary dinner, respecting the boundary I'd maintained about rebuilding our relationship slowly based on his long-term recovery, rather than short-term promises. He sent a card acknowledging our anniversary and expressing continued gratitude for my decision to pursue legal action that had forced him into treatment. His note included an update on his recovery progress and a simple statement, "Thank you for loving me enough to stop enabling my addiction." As the evening concluded and our guests departed, Marcus and I sat together in our living room, reflecting on the extraordinary year we'd experienced. We'd survived a family crisis that could have destroyed our wedding and our relationship. Instead, we'd emerged stronger, more committed to each other, and more confident in our ability to face any challenge together. "Do you ever regret pursuing legal action against your parents?" Marcus asked as we cleaned up from dinner. "Never," I said without hesitation. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most important. If I hadn't stood up for myself then, Dylan would still be gambling, my parents would still be enabling him, and I'd still be the family member expected to sacrifice for everyone else's problems." "Your family seems genuinely different now." "They are different, not perfect, but healthier. They learned that love means supporting each other's growth, rather than enabling each other's worst behaviors. As we prepared for bed, I thought about all the people who had helped transform my devastating family crisis into an opportunity for justice and healing. Eleanor, who had shown me that fighting financial abuse was possible and important. David, who had provided legal tools to demand accountability. Marcus, who had supported my fight rather than pressuring me to maintain family peace. Dr. Walsh, who had helped all of us understand the dysfunctional patterns that needed to change. Most importantly, I thought about the person I'd become through this crisis. The Luna who had discovered her stolen wedding fund was devastated and helpless. The Luna going to bed on her first anniversary was strong, confident, and absolutely certain that she would never again allow anyone to treat her as less important than she deserved. The wedding fund theft had been meant to solve Dylan's gambling crisis at my expense. Instead, it had become the catalyst for fundamental changes that had improved every relationship in our family. Dylan had gotten the addiction treatment he needed. My parents had learned healthier ways to express love and support. And I had discovered that standing up for myself didn't destroy my family. It saved us all from continuing destructive patterns that were harming everyone involved. As I fell asleep beside my husband in our own home, purchased with money we'd saved together through equal partnership and mutual respect, I felt profound gratitude for the crisis that had nearly ruined our wedding. Without that betrayal, I might never have learned to fight for my own future. Without that legal battle, my family might have continued enabling Dylan's addiction while expecting me to absorb the costs. Instead, we'd all learned that real love sometimes requires difficult conversations, firm boundaries, and the courage to hold people accountable for their actions. The wedding fund that had been stolen and recovered had become the foundation for healthier relationships built on respect rather than exploitation. My parents had indeed wished they hadn't given my brother my wedding fund, but not for the reasons they'd initially expected. They'd learned that their theft had consequences far beyond family disappointment, and that real love meant protecting my dreams rather than sacrificing them for someone else's mistakes. Marcus's response to their betrayal had shown them that I was no longer alone in fighting for my own interests. I had a partner who would stand beside me, support my decisions, and ensure that I never again faced family exploitation without protection and advocacy. The woman who had once absorbed costs to maintain family harmony had become someone who demanded equality, respect, and mutual consideration in all her relationships. And everyone who knew her agreed that this transformation had made her not just stronger, but also more capable of giving and receiving genuine love. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.